Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Malsa, for including me, and Kenny K for keeping me in the loop here. I appreciate that. Everybody, I belong to a subculture that is alternatively called stupid, freeing, suicidal, brave, idiotic, inclusive, cultish, challenging, too dangerous, thrilling, and I'm an American motorcycle rider. And those terms can be heard every day describing the subculture that I belong to. And at no point did the builders of the prototype think of me or people like me, enthusiast motorcycles, which are hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, across the world. The builders of the initial prototype, and this was in the 1860s, a bunch of people were messing with putting steam engines on bicycles. And so that prototype had nothing to do with what has developed at the tree, in the branches of the tree, except for a few things. If this is a phenomenon, I think the prototype question is a yes and no answer. Yes, this initial prototype, and I drew a little tree here. These initial routes here, yes, to some of them made some sense. For instance, transportation was one of the very original routes, for sure. A frugal, affordable, simple transportation when compared to the car of the 1860s, if I said 18. Yes, the prototype is a part of the phenomenon because it required certain skills of the operator. That is still true. Yes, because it had inherent danger. The vehicle, a bicycle itself, is not safe in that it cannot hold itself up. If you let go of it, it falls over and it tells you it's not safe. And in fact, Roper, one of the original fitters of steam engines to bicycles, died showing his prototype in France. So the safety aspects, the skill aspects were right up in the front right away. Yes, it is because it immediately had its own social world. You immediately became a motorcyclist. And no, because the performance of the prototypes were so initially low. They were, at one point they bragged about going 12 miles an hour, which of course you could generally pedal your bicycle faster than that. So the initial performance was so initially poor that they had no idea of the dangers that the motorcycle poorly handled does create. And no, because there was no desire for competition. And the joke is that the motorcycle competition started when the second motorcycle was built. And of course, in the prototype form, putting a steam engine on a bicycle, no branches into competition from that initially, but competition has become a huge part of what we do. So to me, looking at this from a purely enthusiast point of view, and just getting into the academic side of things with Dr. Maltsev, Dr. Lawrence's inverted tree does make sense. The initial routes, quite a few initial routes stayed in place. Transportation, frugality, simplicity, and social groups. Transportation, frugality, simplicity, and social groups stayed in place. And these routes blossomed into unimaginable branches that would shock Roper and those who created bikes. Even back in 1903 when Harley Davidson created bikes, it would shock them what has become as top speed contests. We're at a high 360 mile an hour top speeds for a two-wheel on the salt flats and those things. Road racing, a road racing machine goes over 220 miles an hour at certain racetracks in Grand Prix form every lap, which is crazy. 220 miles an hour every lap at certain tracks in MotoGP. Dirt track racing, touring clubs, groups that get together and ride across country, cafe racer clubs, certainly in Britain, and that's where that really came out. Adventure riding has become a huge part of a huge branch. Scooters for transportation, increased bike models. There's even motorcycle taxis. So the branches are kind of crazy. And while those branches were growing, that for us, for those of us who love motorcycling, are wonderful, some really terrible branches grew as well. And that was rider deaths due to crashing these inherently unstable machines. Insurance premiums are very high. You try to get your 16-year-old son or daughter insurance on a big bike, it's tough. Retail pricing has become very expensive. We're into over the $20,000 mark on the highest models, and in the 40s on some of the CVO Harley Davidsons, and then governmental mandates blossomed as well. Not a branch most people like. It's up to you, like that one. So my worldwide subculture, and it's worldwide, grew from this original prototype. It's branched into one of the largest, I think, largest subculture trees ever. I think Matthew will be able to maybe tell us if that's true, if it's one of the world's, but I think it's one of the world's subcultures, depending on how you define a subculture. But I posit that many of these branches began with their own prototype. So somewhere between the root and somewhere in the trunk of the motorcycling tree, some different branches grew. And I thought that the branches might have fallen off and created their own tree by themselves. I kind of thought that maybe some of these branches grew off into prototypes, because the word prototype in my world, as a motorcycle racer, especially as a journalist, especially, a prototype was truly the start of a new product line, or perhaps maybe a complete dismal failure, which has happened as well. So I'll finish this up with a couple of thoughts. I'll close up with a more simple example of a prototype, and it's my personal passion, because our industry has grew into so many small subcultures, and each one had a prototype of some kind. My personal passion and my job is motorcycle rider training, motorcycle instruction. So if you look at the prototype for that, you'd have to look at brave test riders, brave racers working with engineers to provide the prototype, not just the prototype motorcycle, but the prototype of what we should do on the motorcycle. So it's something that, if you think about winning a championship in anything you're doing, in this case motorcycling, you must be fast. And everybody thinks, oh, a champion has to be fast. But the champion must also be consistent, because we get no points toward the championship if we're laying in the dirt. So this idea that going slow on a motorcycle but never crashing is not the prototype rider we want to look at. We don't want to look at the rider who goes very, very fast but falls down all the time. That rider is also delivering a poor message to anybody who watches him or her. So slow is no good, and crashing is no good. But in between those, you find the champions of our sport, and they're world champions, national champions, even club champions. What we do at our school, and it's the Champion School, named that way because we just look at what the best in the world are doing and let them be our prototypes for rider technique. So my very small subculture of rider instruction is based on the prototype of, and it's a method of prototype of what in the best are doing, what is their method, what is their approach. At my own personal skills and speed, I will copy it, and I will take every student, every rider that I meet, every potential rider I meet, and I will give them this prototype of the championship winning rider. And I'll close by saying, in America, that prototype of looking at what the best riders in the world are doing to stay safe and go quick if they want is not being followed. And I will always follow that particular prototype. Thanks.